This is ABC's World News Tonight. Here for Frank Reynolds in Washington, David Brinkley.
Good evening. The news this Monday night is that the U.S. military is involved in the fighting in Central America more deeply than has been made public. Not shooting, but being shot at during night flights, tracking and spying on El Salvador's guerrillas. ABC News' John McWethy reports from the Pentagon.
U.S. intelligence sources tell ABC News that the U.S. Air Force has been routinely flying C-130 gunships out of airfields in Panama on secret missions over both El Salvador and Nicaragua. Sources say the heavily armed aircraft have been fired upon during their missions, but have not yet returned fire. The planes, which carry 105mm howitzers and 20mm cannons, demonstrated in Vietnam that they are capable of laying down a deadly rain of fire. In Central America, however, they are being used to track night movements of guerrilla forces in El Salvador and suspected guerrilla resupply points inside Nicaragua. The C-130 gunships are particularly effective in this mission because they're equipped with special infrared television cameras similar to these that can turn darkness of the jungle at midnight into day. Sources say the gunships have, on certain occasions, violated the airspace of Nicaragua during their intelligence-gathering missions. In addition to the gunships, sources say the U.S. is also providing other C-130s. These equipped to both listen to guerrilla radio transmissions and to help pinpoint where the radio signals come from. These aircraft also fly out of Panama under cover of darkness. To better use intelligence gathered by the U.S., some 175 officers from El Salvador will be flown to Fort Benning, Georgia later this week. There they will go through a 13-week officer training course. If Congress passes even part of the Reagan administration's requested aid for El Salvador, hundreds more of that country's soldiers will be trained in the U.S. And the number of American military advisors in El Salvador itself will continue to be limited to 55. John McWethy, ABC News, the Pentagon.
As the House began discussing building or not building the MX missile, several hundred demonstrators appeared in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol where demonstrations are not allowed, and they chanted against the MX. The Capitol Police seized and arrested about 200 of them, and they were handcuffed and taken away. Coming along, one kind of celebrity hustling another kind of celebrity, presidential candidates raising money from movie stars. And in Hollywood, it's only a movie, but another in the Star Wars series, opening on Wednesday. But a lot of people, some a little strange, are already in line.
This is World News Tonight with David Brinkley in Washington, Max Robinson in Chicago, Peter Jennings in London. World News Tonight, brought to you by Ford Motor Company.
A terrible storm system which battered Texas and the Gulf Coast for a week has now moved over the Atlantic, but authorities are still assessing the damage. Today, the biggest problem is flooding, as rivers swollen by the heavy rains forced thousands from their homes. In Jackson, Mississippi, 5,000 people have been evacuated as the Pearl River continues to rise, already 11 feet above flood stage. The violent weather of recent months has also taken a toll on the American Red Cross, which today said its disaster relief fund has been wiped out. Bob Serkin reports.
For 102 years, the American Red Cross has been bailing out disaster victims. Now, for the first time in recent memory, it's the Red Cross who's crying for help. Since July of last year, the Red Cross has funded 4,300 major disasters, spending more than $33 million on relief for 1 million victims. Today, the Red Cross's disaster fund is broke.
That $33 million constituted about twice what we could have reasonably expected.
In part, the disaster money was doled out this way. $2 million last November to victims of Hurricane Iwa in Hawaii. A month later, $5 million to flood victims in Missouri and Illinois. This spring, over $4 million spent in flood-ravaged southeast Louisiana. And $1.5 million to help those left homeless by the Coalinga, California earthquake.
This has been such an incredible year, and the American public generally is so aware of the disaster needs that this is an appropriate time to ask them for help.
So today at its national convention in Atlanta, the Red Cross, which gets no federal help, pledged to hit the streets to raise $12 million by July 1st.
When disasters struck, the Red Cross helped.
A massive advertising campaign is being launched to help erase a $3 million deficit and refill the disaster funds. With 2 months left on its current fiscal budget, the Red Cross has already begun dipping into next year's disaster funds to provide relief for flood and tornado victims in Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. In a week, the Red Cross could find itself in even tougher financial shape. Hurricane season begins on June 1st. Bob Serkin, ABC News, Atlanta.
In economic news, it was a hectic day of trading on Wall Street. The market plunged 13 points at the outset, but finished up more than 10 points to close over the 1,200 level. The reason for the day's early sell-off, investors' fears that last Friday's huge jump in the nation's money supply might push interest rates back up again. Well, as far as many Americans are concerned, interest rates are still way too high, and that's why in Ohio, thousands of would-be homeowners began lining up at banks over the weekend to apply for low-rate mortgages through a special state plan. Chris Bury reports.
They braved the rain in Toledo, spent the weekend on lawn chairs in Dayton, and pitched tents in Columbus to apply for 6,000 mortgage loans at 9.98% interest rates. First come, first served.
It's just like anything else in life. If you want it bad enough, you do what you have to do to get it.
In Cincinnati, champagne corks popped at midnight as one savings and loan opened early to handle the crowds. To qualify for the discount loans, buyers needed a signed sales contract on a prospective home and proof they hadn't owned a house in 3 years.
You'd have probably had to wait another year, maybe, get into the same kind of house.
Today's loans are a bargain. A $50,000 30-year mortgage financed at 9.98% costs $438 a month. At 12%, the conventional rate in Ohio, the monthly payment is $515, a savings of $77 a month, or more than $27,000 over the course of 30 years. For more expensive homes, the difference is even greater.
It's between $150 and $170 per month difference in our house payments, and we're very interested in getting a home.
While today's crowds will quickly exhaust the $300 million made available by a state bond sale, Ohio plans to offer more bargain loans later this year, keeping alive a modest recovery in home sales and construction that's already begun. Chris Bury, ABC News.
Some things in life are constant.
Overseas today, the South African Air Force attacked the capital of next-door Mozambique. The raid on Maputo lasted only about 90 seconds. The target was facilities belonging to the African National Congress, which has claimed responsibility for that car bomb explosion in the South African capital on Friday. In the raid today, 5 people are reported to have been killed. They are said by sources in Mozambique to have been civilians. During a news conference, a South African brigadier general made it clear the raid had been carefully planned, models and designs of the target area in detail. And it is not the first time South Africa has gone outside its own borders to strike at ANC bases. And now the latest disruptions in the Middle East. In Lebanon, it has been another day for kidnapping. Druze Muslim and Maronite Christian militiamen have been on a rampage of kidnapping and killing for the last several days. Today, a Maronite bishop was seized by the Druze, but later released. The PLO chairman, Yasser Arafat, is faced with mutiny in the ranks of his own organization. Here's ABC's Charles Glass.
Arafat is making frequent visits to his troops in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. But his trips there are as much an attempt to heal the wounds within his Al-Fatah guerrilla group as they are to raise his men's morale to face Israel.
Once Arafat arrives in the Bekaa to meet the Al-Fatah fighters, his men go out of their way to demonstrate their loyalty. But many, who claim to be in the majority, are questioning his decisions, particularly his recent appointment of a new military chief for the Bekaa. Arafat is just bowed to pressure by agreeing to a compromise candidate. At the same time, he told his troops they were now forbidden to have any contact with the dissident leaders. Several senior officers who are reported to enjoy Syrian and Libyan backing say their challenge to Arafat extends to a demand for more radical policies. For now, Arafat is spending more time in Lebanon with his rank and file, seeking to prevent the disagreement from exploding into a Palestinian versus Palestinian battle. Charles Glass, ABC News, Damascus.
There has been another tragedy overseas caused by weather. A wave of avalanches has hit the small village of Telio in the Italian Alps. 8 people were killed yesterday when the first slide of snow and mud crashed into their houses at lunchtime. Today, there were 3 more avalanches, and one of them hit the town's recreation center for the handicapped. 2 more people died, and 3 are still missing. And now Eastern Europe. The relationship between the Soviet Union and its satellites does not often allow room for open dissatisfaction, at least not without penalties. There are ways, however, to judge what people in Poland, for example, think about the Soviets. You might go to a soccer game. Here's ABC's David Ensor.
This is what they saw and heard here on Polish television's live coverage of the match as the national anthem of the Soviet Union was played. ABC's camera crew down on the field saw the same Soviet team, but heard something quite different. In Poland, whistling is booing, and that's what 100,000 Poles were doing. And for the Polish national anthem, same contrast. On Polish television, a tape of a band playing. In reality, 100,000 voices. Then the audience sat down to watch amid heavy security. The Poles dominated play and scored first with a header. That produced euphoria. But later, a Polish player accidentally scored against his own team. A tragedy for him. The crowd was hushed, and the final score between Poland and its big eastern neighbor, 1-1. Everyone in the stadium knew everything that had happened. But as is so often true here, the rest of the country only got part of the story. David Ensor, ABC News, Warsaw.
Just one other note about the Soviets and soccer. Hungarians like to tell about the time they beat the Soviet Union. The late President Brezhnev sent a telegram to the Hungarian leader János Kadar. Congratulations. Stop. Gas. Stop. Oil. Stop. It is surely apocryphal, but in the Soviet bloc, a sense of humor helps.
In Columbia, South Carolina, 42 people described as top-level dope dealers were indicted, charged with bringing in $800 million worth of drugs. It was, they said, a white-collar drug bust. If it involves money in any way at all, it is predictable that crooks and thieves will be drawn to it like cats to sardines. And since credit cards are about money, stealing, faking, and forging them is now a small industry, or maybe a big one, about $1 billion a year. As a House Banking Subcommittee heard today, and as ABC's Charles Gibson reports.
They dressed him up like the Elephant Man, shrouded with a hood and cape. He affected a limp, and they made him sound like Donald Duck. Even members of Congress were intrigued by the elaborate preparations for a man who once worked in organized crime, passing phony credit cards.
I made a very, very good living. I went from hot dogs to caviar. You're dealing in large money, large quantities of money. It's like being a Wall Street broker.
His bread and butter? Visa and MasterCharge cards, the easiest to use illegally, he said. The cards came from prostitutes or were stolen through connections at the post office or were printed from blanks, easily obtainable and forged. He worked stores around 42nd and 8th Avenue in New York. About 2,000 phony cards are passed in that city every day, he said.
How much do you estimate in a day that you could charge to my account?
If you really got out and work, you could do like 10,000 easy.
10,000 a day?
Yeah.
And some stores, called juice joints in the trade, seek the illegal credit card business and take a cut for themselves.
Say if I'm buying a TV, it costs $200, $250. Then they'll charge me like $500 for it. But I could take 5, 10 cards in at one time and work them. There's no problem.
The subcommittee wants to make dealing in illegal credit cards a federal crime, but that may not help. As the witness said, there's too much money in this to quit. Charles Gibson, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
It is reported tonight President Reagan plans to keep Jill Ruckelshaus as a member of the Commission on Civil Rights, but will replace 3 others, 2 of them held over from the Carter administration. His critics say Mr. Reagan wants new members of more conservative views. The Democratic Party chairman, Charles Bonnet, is furious. The Democrats are planning a telephone call-in to raise funds next weekend, and he accuses the Republicans of trying to jam the phone lines to prevent Democratic money givers from getting through. And in Hollywood, political celebrities are asking movie celebrities for political money and getting it, as ABC's Sander Van Oka reports.
Gary Hart, Democratic candidate for president and a political star, raised about $30,000 from the 200 guests at this Beverly Hills cocktail party. They came to shake his hand, listen to him speak, and perhaps just as important to them, rub elbows with some of their own homebred stars. Hart, along with the other Democratic candidates, will be working this valuable piece of California real estate for the next year and a half, because this is where the money is.
There is political gold in the Hollywood Hills, and this year more than ever before, all the presidential candidates are prospecting here, with stars in their eyes and money on their minds.
For centuries, actors are used to being asked to come to the party and, by the way, bring your guitar. And that's essentially what politicians are doing. And I guess we're used to it.
Franklin D. Roosevelt liked to be seen with Will Rogers, even though Rogers poked fun at him, because he was the most popular entertainer of his time. Jack Kennedy did not mind when Marilyn Monroe sang Happy Birthday to him at Madison Square Garden. Richard Nixon let Sammy Davis Jr. give him a big hug at the 1972 Republican Convention. And no president has ever turned down a chance to play straight man to Bob Hope.
He doesn't know how to lie, exaggerate, or cheat. He's always had an agent for that.
Politicians will go to those people who can help them articulate their issues and raise money. Entertainers are natural targets. They have constituents already all over the country, and they have credibility. People know who they are, and they listen, and they'll turn out to listen.
Ironically, it was Richard Nixon and Watergate that made entertainers more valuable to politicians than ever before. Nixon's 1972 fundraising excesses produced a 1974 amendment to the Federal Election Campaign Act. It limited an individual's contribution to $1,000 for each federal campaign, plus an additional $1,000 for each primary race. But the law does allow all the proceeds from benefit performances to be turned over to the candidate. For example, in two concerts in December 1979, Linda Ronstadt, the Eagles, and Chicago raised about $300,000 for Jerry Brown's presidential campaign. And that kind of fundraising can make entertainers a major source of candidates' money. Mike Curb, record executive and new finance chairman of the Republican Party, admits concerts are a way to beat the law.
I'm not saying this is healthy, but I'm saying that this has provided an opportunity for a number of candidates to kind of get around the $1,000 limitation.
Jeff Wald, another major record executive who says he has raised $3 million for Democrats in the past 10 years, has no illusions about why people attend political concerts.
To be really blunt, when we do a concert for one of the candidates, most of those kids don't give a damn if we're doing for Attila the Hun. You know, they're out to see the act.
And what are people like Wald after? Gratification, recognition from people he thinks are the real stars, invitations to the White House, letters of thanks from politicians who have stars in their eyes. Many Hollywood stars have already taped appearances for use in a Memorial Day telethon, which is expected to raise $7 million for the Democratic Party. One of those stars, Dynasty's John Forsythe, admits to being starstruck by Washington.
I've been at an awful lot of parties in Washington. I'm always surprised to look across the room and to see the Secretary of State, or the Secretary of the Treasury. And I must say that I almost go over and ask him for an autograph.
But in Washington, politicians don't want actors' autographs. They want help with campaigns.
Well, they're usually terribly polite, loved your last film, etc., or whatever. Now, I'll tell you, I'm involved in something that I think will be of particular interest to you and your sensitivities, etc. It's like a salesman.
New Hampshire, where the nation's first primary will be held next March, is 3,000 miles away from Hollywood. But in the new era of multi-million-dollar campaigns, presidential candidates cannot get there without stopping here first. Sandra Van Oker, ABC News, Hollywood.
A new movie, the third in the Star Wars series, opens on Wednesday. And when it opens in Hollywood, some will have been waiting in line for more than a week. And it is clear the audience will not be your ordinary mom and pop and the kids, as ABC's Judd Rose reports from Hollywood.
6 years ago, Star Wars hit the screen, proving a box office bombshell. The original earned $524 million. The sequel, The Empire Strikes Back, soared almost as high, about $365 million at last count. Now comes the third in the series, The Return of the Jedi, and it's expected to earn as much or more than either of its predecessors. In fact, it won't open for 2 more days, but already the lines are down the block.
You meet a lot of weird people out here?
None weirder than us.
These are the 50-odd, emphasis on odd, men and women who've camped outside a Hollywood theater, some for the past 6 days and nights, to be first in line for Jedi.
I am wondering, why are you here?
I know why I'm supposed to be here.
Why? Because I got nowhere else to go.
Jedi will be opening in more than 950 theaters nationwide. This one happens to be on Hollywood Boulevard, an unsavory part of Los Angeles, where it's not surprising to see strangely dressed people sleeping on the sidewalk. But even in this high-crime area, the fans of Jedi have triumphed over the forces of darkness.
Most people you consider bad are on our side. It's like the Force is with us.
The Force is with them occasionally, the police force, that is, but for the most part, they've gone unmolested, at least for the most part.
You comunista! Yes, no!
This morning, the Jedi faithful dedicated a makeshift star in honor of Star Wars creator George Lucas. That's one way of passing the time until the first show, which isn't till Wednesday morning. But already, those at the front of the line are making plans.
It's going to be nice and dark and warm in there, so we're going to probably go straight to sleep.
Judd Rose, ABC News, Hollywood.
Once again, tonight's top story. Intelligence sources tell ABC News U.S. Air Force planes, C-130s, routinely fly out of Panama on spy missions over El Salvador and Nicaragua, that they have been shot at but have not yet shot back, all in support of El Salvador's government troops fighting the guerrillas. Later tonight on Nightline, Ted Koppel talks with Arthur Ashe about the loudmouth, bad-mannered tennis players and what they are doing to the game. For all of us at ABC's World News Tonight, thank you and good night.
From ABC, this has been World News Tonight.